Today on the Next Generation Critic, we will always have Paris, which has nothing to do with Paris. As usual, each episode starts with 100 points, taking 1 point away for each error, and I make terribly snarky comments along the way. Like the first 2 points are lost since Wesley isn't in the show, and neither is Denise Crosby. If your name is on the credits, you should get at least 5 lines, and they got 0. I know Tasha died in the last episode, but that's the producer's fault, isn't it? Shout out to the target counter in the back, it is working correctly. In this episode, a scientist's experiment goes astray and affects everyone in the galaxy nearby. The first point is lost for a single set of doors on the turbolift. This experiment affected Picard. He now thinks he is Dr. Paul Mannheim. Never sit next to a telepath when you're thinking about a long-lost love. Geordi says, I number 1. Now Geordi says, I number 2. Minus 1 point for black squares of paper on the panels in the back to block the reflection. Actually, Picard, you have heard of Paul Mannheim, which is why you're fidgeting so much. Data talks about Mannheim's research with time and gravity, but doesn't make the connection. If Wesley was on the show, he would have figured it out. Picard says he didn't have the pleasure. That's because he stood her up. Deanna interferes with Picard's personal life by saying she doesn't want to interfere. Picard says, Deanna, mind your own business, I'll go talk to Guinan instead. Deanna says, Guinan won't be on the show until next year, so counseling everyone is still my business. Then she suggests for Captain Picard to analyze his feelings, and Captain Picard says, Deanna, that's girl talk. Picard poses like Peter Pan. Captain Picard polishes his sword. Is this a Freudian reference? And minus 1 point for having credits 6 minutes into the show. There is no way this holodeck will know what this cafe looked like on April 9th, 2242. So minus 1 point, and minus 1 point for Picard telling the computer that 1500 hours is 3 o'clock. The computer already knows that. And he says it was a warm spring day when Janice said it was raining. 300 years in the future, phone booths will have no privacy. Ironically, the Star Trek world has communicators, but the 1980s team had no idea about cell phones. And just what kind of a musical instrument is that? You never see it again. While Picard is taking in the beautiful Paris matte painting, he's wondering, does everyone buy shelves from the Farpoint station? Edward asked, would you like some cheese with your wine? That's kind of rude. Picard says he came for the view, particularly the 2 girls sitting right behind him. If you have the high-res Blu-ray edition, you can see they serve tribbles on the menu. If you want me to get the Blu-ray edition, click the like button, the share button, and that subscribe button. Picard says he was going to meet someone. Edward automatically assumes it was a woman. That's sexist. Picard says no, it was the third baseman. Picard's hands are on the table, and now they are crossed, so minus 1 point. Edward says, I have the perfect place for you to sit right here to check out the girls, and Fran has her dress on backwards. Picard performs the Picard maneuver. Look closely, Fran has her legs parallel, now they are crossed, so minus 1 point. Many thanks to Gabrielle wearing this beautiful dress and showing a whole lot of skin. However, this is the birds and bees talk. Guys who see girls dressed like this don't think they're in for a long-term commitment, so it confuses them. Aww. Captain Picard, you are making a fool out of yourself staring at young, scantily clad girls, so stop watching. Poor Gabrielle got stood up on a one-night stand. Now she says, Jean-Luc, do we know each other, or are you just staring at me like a creepy old man? Picard's like, uh-oh, I'm in trouble now. That's what she said. Turns out she was waiting for the left fielder. Picard says he was afraid, and here is what he was afraid of. Look closely, but not too close. Gabrielle has no tan lines, which means she goes to nude beaches, and young Jean-Luc was afraid to go get naked on the beach and show off his pale number 1. And that is the true story of why he stood her up. She's like, are you serious? Look close, Picard stops to wait for the doors to be completely open, but why does he stop here to wait before they're completely closed? So minus 1 point, he should have kept going. This is a rare handheld shot and a good look at the chairs at the consoles. This is the only picture I got of the Lalo, but that might not be right. Data tries to give a better description than a hiccup, but they always cut him off. Now Riker poses like Peter Pan. Geordi describes the Van Dor system as a binary system. Does that mean our star system is non-binary? Geordi says, I number 3. Geordi says, I number 4. Now it's time to play musical chairs on the bridge. Data and Geordi are sitting perfectly still. Picard corrects himself and Geordi and Data are like, hey, did he just do that? Now another round of Enterprise Bridge musical chairs. Did it ever occur to Starfleet, hey, maybe we should have an emergency transporter pad in Sickbay? Look closely, there is an Enterprise in that painting on the wall. When Picard sees a beautiful woman, his response is, No wonder he's single. And Dr. Crusher's like, what did she just say to him? One thing you never find out is whether or not the distress call was sent out right after the accident that killed the crew. She says that was a few weeks ago, but since time is distorted here, it may have taken a while for that distress call to get out. Janice says Mannheim would never knowingly do anything. -1 point for this obvious plot device. Dr. Crusher walking in on them right when she's talking about the past. And now she can't tell them anymore because Dr. Crusher arrived. Now we're gonna see Dr. Crusher turn into a giant iceberg in just seconds. Data and Riker are both thinking, ooh, this is gonna be fun to watch. So either the third baseman or the left fielder was responsible. Look at the floor. There is no cut in the carpet, which will make a mess when this turbolift starts, so -1 point. Look at the floor. There is no cut in the carpet, which will make a mess when this turbolift starts to move, so -1 point. It appears even the narrator is affected by the Mannheim effect. This is a nice photo of Livingston the fish. Riker says, I number 5, so it's time for a drink. Now they're drunk and have no idea how it happened. Look closely, the stars on the view screen are just a static display. This is the difference between Star Trek and Star Wars, because in Star Wars, there is no try. The next point is lost for this ghost image of some type of case on the transporter pad when they came back. Dr. Mannheim is experiencing 2 dimensions at once. No wonder he likes his studies. Picard and Mannheim are going to get into an old man lovers fight. Yes! Mannheim says, Picard, it's going to get worse for you as soon as I can stand up. Dr. Mannheim seems surprised there is an android on a Starfleet vessel, which implies there are more androids out there. Dr. Mannheim explains what they achieved, then tells Deanna to get his notes. Janice says, hey, quit hitting on Deanna when I'm right here, and Dr. Crusher is thinking, great, she's going to leave him for Picard right here in my own sickbay. Picard and Data have no idea what they're thinking right now. Well, Dr. Mannheim says, to save ourselves, we need to execute the android. Worf says, I number 6. The boys sit around the table discussing what to do next while Janice intrudes. The 3 jump up and leave while Worf is thinking, are they really going to do the nasty in the conference room while her husband is dying in sickbay? Janice wants to know why he didn't show up. Picard says, it's because you go to nude beaches. And she's like, what? She says, oh, come on, you can do better than that. So Picard says, I saw what you did with Valentino. I don't think I could keep up like that. After all, I have an artificial heart. Star Trek never really was good with mushy talk, was it? Picard, you're way too late to try that line now. And yes, you are that transparent. Dr. Crusher has 1 tool in each hand. Now they magically jump to 1 hand and she's rubbing his hair, so -1 point. Deanna now tries to stick her nose in Beverly's personal life, who says, Deanna, we always blow you off and talk to Guinan. And Deanna says, no, that's not until next year. Quit talking about a ghost from his past. You never wanted to hook up. You just want him to be single like you are. Then Beverly says, whoop-de-doo, I'm going to ignore your counseling like everyone else does. Then Deanna says, well, I'm not the one that got fired. Then Beverly says, that's because you show cleavage all the time, which proves my point. The producers are sexist. Then they got into a really good cat fight that would have shot ratings through the roof. But The Next Generation was in first-run syndication and aired at 7 p.m. when kids were still up, so it had to be cut. Aww. Dr. Mannheim's thinking, damn, I just saw some good shit. Dr. Mannheim says, Jean-Luc, if something happens to me, I put in my will that you can have Janice. Then Picard says, wow, you've really been in deep space for a long time. We haven't done that in centuries. But thanks, I might take you up on your offer just to piss off the doctor. He says she might have left him and he would have never known. That means they haven't done the nasty yet for a while. No wonder he was having convulsions. Mannheim says, perhaps I am not a man. Picard says, have Dr. Crusher check you out and she can prescribe you some Viagra. Does it work? Yes, but not right away. You have to wait a few minutes. Data and Picard discuss philosophy. Data now ponders his place in life and uses a contraction. Picard now tries to use an old phrase on Data, who has no idea what Picard is talking about, so simply says, I'll go immediately, sir. -1 point for a visible microphone over Data's head. He doesn't even say anything there. Data says, I number 7. -1 point for an obvious stunt double for Data. This can be taken in more ways than one. They skip the scene that explains what Data needs to do, so he makes commentary as he goes along. Now there are 3 Datas who decide to argue about whether they will get paid 3 times for this scene or not. The middle Data uses a contraction, so -1 point. And -1 point for Data surviving this procedure. He is sticking antimatter into a time distortion. Data says the distortion is well patched. Dr. Crusher says it's amazing the time distortion is gone as well as your ED problem. So the first thing he wants to know is, where is my wife? -1 point because she was obviously in front of him the whole time. She says, I can feel it. You're right. It is working again. Dr. Mannheim tells Janice they are going to fool around like never before. Now that he's got his mojo back, Janice no longer needs Picard to come to her rescue. Aww. Deanna tries girl talk with Janice but just drops her off at the holodeck instead. -1 point because Gabrielle is still in there. Eduardo says, Madame, look, we got these shells from the Farpoint station. It turns out all this is made possible by the shortstop. Picard wants to properly say goodbye to her with a drink of holographic wine. Look closely behind Captain Picard, Gabrielle is now gone. Look closely, this extra starts at the wrong time, so -1 point. -1 point for visible tape on the floor right where Picard stops. Jean-Luc performs the Picard maneuver. The Enterprise heads off to Serona 8 for their shore leave of blue drinks at the Blue Parrot Cafe. But we never do find out what Zanzimen really are, do we? Spoiler alert, it turns out all this time Francine and Gabrielle are waiting for Wesley. And you thought only Barclay had an imagination. We will see Dan Kern one more time on Voyager. Lance Spellerberg is a total Trekkie and will be back next year. Jean-Paul Vignon is a French singer and was on the Ed Sullivan Show. Kelly Ashmore played Francine. The beautiful Isabel Garcia Lorca was born in Montreal, Canada. Rod Loomis was on Jason of Star Command and Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. And Michelle Phillips was one of the Mamas and the Papas, with 80 screen credits to her name including Automan, TJ Hooker, and Herman's Head. We Will Always Have Paris, a four-way romance as well as being about the timeline getting thrown way out of whack, gets a score of 78%. Thanks for viewing. Be sure to leave comments below, click that like button, the share button, the subscribe button, and I'll see you again soon.